Robert Harrington stepped out of his sleek black limousine at the entrance to Forest Lawn Cemetery in Los Angeles, the California sun beating down on his graying hair as he gripped a bouquet of white lilies tightly in his hand. But the sight that greeted him at his son Elias's grave made him stop dead in his tracks. A little girl no older than 5, with curls that mirrored the ones Elias had as a child, stood there placing wildflowers on the headstone while a young man Robert had never wanted to see again waited quietly beside her. Jackson. The name hit Robert like a punch to the gut, stirring up every regret he had buried since the day he disowned Elias for loving another man. Robert's polished leather shoes crunched on the gravel path as he approached, his mind racing through the years of silence that had followed his harsh words at that family dinner 5 years ago. "You're no son of mine if you choose this lifestyle," he had shouted, watching Elias walk out the door with Jackson at his side. Now, standing here on the 2nd anniversary of Elias's fatal car accident, Robert had come seeking some kind of closure, some way to quiet the guilt that kept him awake at night. Instead, he found this child and the man who had been at the center of the rift that tore his family apart. The little girl turned, her wide brown eyes locking onto his, and for a split second Robert saw Elias staring back at him. "Who are you?" she asked softly, clutching a small teddy bear to her chest. Jackson stepped forward protectively, his jaw tight, the same quiet strength Robert remembered from the one time they had met. "Mr. Harrington," Jackson said, his voice steady but laced with something deeper, pain, perhaps, or defiance. "I didn't expect to see you here." The words hung in the warm air, and Robert felt the weight of every missed phone call, every unopened letter from Elias that he had thrown away in anger. He had built an empire in real estate, turning empty lots into skyscrapers across California, but he had failed at the one thing that should have mattered most: being a father to the son who had only wanted acceptance. Now, with this unexpected little girl standing between them, Robert realized the grave wasn't just a place of mourning. It was the beginning of truths he had never imagined. Jackson knelt down to the girl's level, whispering something that made her nod and step back a little, but her eyes never left Robert. "This is Lily," Jackson said finally, straightening up. "Elias's daughter." The revelation landed like a thunderclap, shattering the careful walls Robert had constructed around his heart. How could Elias, the son he had rejected for being gay, have a daughter? And why had no one told him? Robert's hand trembled as he set the lilies on the grass, the flowers suddenly feeling inadequate against the storm brewing inside him. As they stood there in the bright sunlight, Robert's mind flashed back to the last real conversation he had with Elias, the one where his son had sat across from him in the family study, hands clasped, eyes full of hope. "Dad, I need you to understand. This isn't a choice. Jackson and I, we love each other. We've built something real." Robert had slammed his fist on the desk, refusing to listen, calling it a phase, a betrayal of everything he had worked for. Now, looking at Lily's innocent face, he wondered how many other secrets Elias had kept to protect the life he had chosen. Jackson watched him closely, as if waiting for the explosion that never came. Instead, Robert felt something shift inside, a crack in the armor of pride that had ruled his life for decades. "We should talk," he said quietly, surprising even himself. Jackson nodded once, picking up Lily's hand again. "Not here. Come with us." The three of them walked away from the grave together, the cemetery paths winding under oak trees that had stood for centuries, much like the prejudices Robert now questioned for the first time. Lily skipped ahead a few steps, humming a tune Elias used to sing, and Robert felt tears he hadn't shed in years prick at his eyes. This was not the closure he had sought. This was the beginning of something far more complicated, a reckoning with the man he had become and the son he had lost. Back at the modest bungalow in Silver Lake where Jackson and Lily lived, Robert sat on the edge of a worn couch, the kind of home Elias had always dreamed of, simple, filled with books and photos rather than the marble and gold of Robert's mansion in Beverly Hills. Jackson poured coffee with steady hands, but Robert could see the tension in his shoulders, The way he glanced at Lily playing in the backyard through the sliding glass door. She was born 2 years before the accident, Jackson explained, his voice low to keep the conversation from reaching the girl's ears. Elias wanted her more than anything. We used a surrogate. His choice, his blood. He said it was the one way he could give her the family he always wanted, even if you never accepted us. Robert stared into his cup, the bitterness of the coffee mirroring the regret rising in his throat. He had pictured Elias's life as reckless, unstable, proof that his lifestyle would lead to nothing but pain. Instead, here was evidence of love so deep it had created a child, a legacy Robert had never been invited to share. The afternoon stretched on as Jackson shared fragments of the years Robert had missed. Elias working as a graphic designer, building a quiet life away from the spotlight of his father's wealth, coming home every night to Jackson and the dreams they shared. Robert listened, each word chipping away at the narrative he had told himself to justify the disownment. By the time Lily ran inside asking for juice, Robert had made a decision he never thought possible. He would stay, at least for now, to understand the son he had lost and the family secret that had been hidden in plain sight. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the backyard, Robert realized this little girl and the man beside her weren't just reminders of his failure. They were the key to finally becoming the father Elias had deserved all along. Jackson watched Robert from the kitchen window as the older man sat on the back porch steps, staring at the swing set Elias had assembled the summer before Lily turned 3. The sight stirred memories Jackson had tried to lock away after the funeral, the kind that kept him awake on nights when Lily asked why she didn't have a grandpa like her friends at preschool. Elias had always spoken of Robert with a mix of love and sorrow, saying the rejection hurt, but never dimmed his hope that one day things might change. Now, that day had arrived in the most unexpected way, and Jackson felt the weight of every promise he had made to his late partner pressing down on him. "He looks lost," Lily said, tugging at Jackson's sleeve with sticky fingers from her juice box. "Can I show him my drawings?" Jackson smiled softly, ruffling her hair, the same dark waves Elias had passed down. "Maybe later, sweetheart. Let him have a minute." Inside, Jackson pulled out an old photo album from the shelf, the one Elias had kept hidden from the world but filled with their story. He flipped to the first page, the image of them meeting at UCLA during freshman orientation hitting him with fresh ache. Elias had been the outgoing one, laughing loudly in the crowded quad, while Jackson stood awkwardly with his backpack, fresh from a small town in Oregon where being gay meant whispers and sidelong glances. "You look like you could use a friend," Elias had said that day, extending a hand that changed everything. Their friendship blossomed into something deeper over late-night study sessions and weekend hikes in the hills above campus. Jackson remembered the night Elias first kissed him under the stars at Griffith Observatory, the city lights twinkling below like a promise of a future free from fear. "I don't care what my dad thinks," Elias had whispered. "This is who I am." But reality had crashed in soon after graduation when Elias brought Jackson home for Thanksgiving. Robert's face had hardened at the dinner table, his questions turning sharp, his disapproval a wall no amount of charm could breach. Jackson had seen the pain in Elias's eyes that night as they drove back to their tiny apartment, the way his partner gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. "He'll come around," Elias had said then, but the years proved otherwise. Calls went unanswered, invitations to holidays ignored. Still, Elias never stopped trying in small ways, sending cards on Father's Day, updating Robert on his promotions at the design firm. Jackson had supported him through it all, their love growing stronger in the face of rejection, a quiet rebellion against the world that tried to define them by who they loved. Now, as Robert stepped back inside, Jackson handed him the album. "You should see this. Elias kept it for you, even if he never mailed it." Robert's hands shook as he turned the pages, each photo a window into the life he had shut out. Elias and Jackson at pride parades in West Hollywood, arms around each other amid rainbow flags. The two of them painting the nursery walls soft blue when the surrogate confirmed the pregnancy. Elias cradling newborn Lily in the hospital, tears of joy streaming down his face. I thought it was all a mistake," Robert murmured, his voice cracking for the first time. "That you'd ruin him." Jackson felt the old anger rise but pushed it down, remembering Elias's final words in the hospital after the accident. "Tell Dad I forgave him. Tell him Lily needs family." The misunderstanding had cost them years, but Jackson saw now that Robert's prejudice stemmed from his own father's rigid expectations, passed down like an unwanted inheritance. They talked late into the evening, Lily asleep on the couch with her teddy bear. Jackson shared the struggles Elias had faced coming to terms with his identity in college, the nights he cried wondering if love was worth losing his father. Robert listened, his billionaire facade crumbling as he admitted the fear that had driven his reaction. The worry that society would judge him, that his business empire built on traditional values would suffer. "I was wrong," he said simply, and in those 3 words Jackson heard the start of healing. But forgiveness didn't come easy. Jackson had built walls of his own, raising Lily alone while mourning the man who had been his everything. As midnight approached, Robert stood to leave, promising to return the next day. Jackson watched the limousine pull away, feeling the first stirrings of hope mixed with caution. This encounter wasn't just about Robert's awakening. It was Jackson's chance to honor Elias by choosing understanding over resentment, a pivotal decision that would reshape their fractured family. The night air carried the scent of jasmine from the garden Elias had planted, and Jackson whispered to the stars, "We made it this far, love. Maybe now we can finish the journey." The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm Jackson hadn't known since before the accident. Robert arrived every afternoon after his meetings, trading his suits for casual shirts and spending hours with Lily in the backyard, pushing her on the swing Elias had built or helping her plant flowers in the small garden patch. Jackson observed from the sidelines at first, his heart guarded, but he couldn't deny the way Lily's laughter filled the house like sunlight after a long storm. She called Robert Grandpa Rob after the 3rd visit, the name slipping out naturally and bringing a rare smile to the older man's face. For Jackson, each moment stirred memories of Elias's dreams for their family, the ones they had whispered about during quiet evenings on the couch, planning a life where prejudice couldn't touch them. Flashbacks pulled Jackson back to the day they decided to have Lily. Elias had come home from the clinic appointment, eyes bright with possibility. The surrogate said yes. "My DNA, your love, we can do this, Jax. We can give her everything we never had growing up." Jackson had hesitated then, worried about the cost, the judgment from strangers who might question 2 men raising a daughter. But Elias's conviction had won him over, their shared decision a testament to the growth they had found together. In college, Elias had struggled with his identity, hiding his feelings from roommates until Jackson helped him embrace the truth without shame. "Being gay doesn't make me less of a man," Elias had declared one night after a heated argument with his own doubts. "It just makes our love different, stronger." Jackson had been there through the identity crisis, holding him through tears and celebrating the breakthroughs that shaped the confident partner Elias became. Society's pressures tested them too. At Elias's design firm, whispers followed their engagement announcement, clients raising eyebrows at the openly gay couple. Jackson faced similar challenges in his teaching job at a local elementary school, fielding questions from parents who didn't understand why a man like him chose this path. Yet they stood together, turning every slight into fuel for their bond. The decision to pursue parenthood had been their boldest step, a way to create the family Elias's father had denied them. Now, watching Robert read Lily a bedtime story, one of the ones Elias used to read, Jackson felt the sacrifice Elias had made in keeping their secret. He had protected Lily from the rejection he knew too well, choosing silence over confrontation. Tensions rose when Robert asked about the accident details one evening, his voice thick with unresolved guilt. If I hadn't pushed him away, maybe he wouldn't have been driving so fast that night. Jackson clenched his fists, the misunderstanding flaring up again. It wasn't about you that night. He was rushing home to us after a late meeting. Blaming yourself won't bring him back. The words hung heavy, forcing Robert to confront how his prejudice had indirectly shaped their lives. Jackson saw the man's internal battle, the powerful billionaire reduced to tears over coffee, admitting how his own father's expectations had blinded him to love in all forms. "I thought strength meant control," Robert confessed. "Elias showed me it meant letting go." In that moment, Jackson made a choice to share more, pulling out Elias's journal from the nightstand. Pages filled with entries about their love, the joy of Lily's first steps, and quiet hopes for reconciliation. Robert read in silence, each word a bridge across the chasm of lost time. As summer evenings lengthened, Jackson began to open up about his own growth after Elias's death. The grief had nearly broken him, but Lily's needs forced him to rise, teaching him resilience he never knew he possessed. "Elias always said family isn't blood. It's the people who stay," Jackson told Robert one night on the porch. The older man nodded, his eyes reflecting a new understanding. Misunderstandings still surfaced, like when Robert offered financial help that Jackson initially refused, seeing it as charity rather than amends. But through patient conversations, they navigated the betrayal of past silences, Jackson realizing his anger had been a shield against further hurt. Lily's innocent questions, "Did Daddy love Grandpa Rob?" pushed them both toward honesty, turning conflict into connection. By the end of the month, Robert had canceled business trips to spend more time with them, his empire taking a back seat to the family he was rebuilding. Jackson felt Elias's presence in every shared laugh, the emotional journey circling back to the love that had started it all. Yet deeper secrets lingered, ones that would soon test their fragile peace and force Jackson to decide if forgiveness could truly heal the wounds of years apart. The harmony shattered one humid August afternoon when Robert arrived with legal documents in hand, his face etched with the kind of determination that had built his fortune. "I want to set up a trust for Lily," he explained, spreading the papers on the kitchen table, "and petition for joint custody rights as her grandfather." Jackson's stomach dropped, the old fears rushing back like a wave. Was this the betrayal Elias had warned about in his final lucid moments at the hospital? "You think you can just walk in and claim part of her life after everything?" Jackson shot back, his voice rising for the first time. Lily paused her coloring in the next room, sensing the shift, and Jackson ushered her outside to play, his heart pounding with the weight of protection. Robert's offer, meant as redemption, felt like control all over again, the same power that had once torn Elias away. The misunderstanding escalated as Jackson accused Robert of using his wealth to buy what he couldn't earn: trust. "Elias hid her from you because he knew you'd try to mold her into your world, away from who we are." Robert stood his ground, revealing his own crisis, the nights he lay awake regretting the disownment, the therapy sessions where he unpacked his homophobia rooted in generational expectations. "I lost my son once. I won't lose my granddaughter." Their argument spilled into the backyard, Lily watching wide-eyed from the swing, forcing Jackson to confront the internal storm he had buried. Raising her alone had been his sacrifice, a daily choice to honor Elias by giving her stability without the shadow of rejection. Now, Robert's involvement threatened that fragile balance, stirring doubts about whether Jackson could ever fully trust a man who had once rejected their love. In the days that followed, the tension built through small decisions. Jackson canceled a planned outing to the zoo when Robert suggested including his own circle of influential friends, fearing judgment. Robert, in turn, withdrew slightly, his pride wounded by the rejection of his help. Flashbacks haunted Jackson during sleepless nights. The day Elias had proposed on a hike in Runyon Canyon, kneeling with a simple ring and promising a future free from fear. "No matter what Dad says, we'll make our own family." That promise had carried them through societal stares and family silence, culminating in Lily's birth, a triumph of their commitment. Elias's growth from insecure college kid to devoted father had inspired Jackson, teaching him that true strength lay in vulnerability. Now, facing Robert, Jackson had to choose between guarding the past or risking openness for Lily's sake. A breaking point came when Lily fell ill with a fever, her small body trembling as they rushed her to the hospital. Robert arrived unannounced, his limo idling outside the ER, and for the first time Jackson allowed the help. Robert pulling strings for the best pediatrician. Sitting in the waiting room, they talked honestly about the betrayal Elias had felt, the way rejection had shaped his choices even in death. "He forgave you in his heart," Jackson admitted, the words a turning point. Robert's eyes filled with tears, acknowledging how his actions had forced Elias into secrecy. The crisis passed, Lily recovering quickly, but it highlighted the stakes. Every decision now carried consequences for 3 generations. Jackson wrestled with his identity once more, questioning if his role as protector meant isolation or if growth required letting Robert in. As they left the hospital together, the sun setting over the city, Jackson made a pivotal choice: to give Robert a chance, not for himself, but for the daughter who deserved every piece of her heritage. The family secret had surfaced, and with it came the possibility of healing, though the road ahead promised more tests of loyalty and love. Lily's recovery brought a tentative peace, but the revelations kept coming in quiet conversations that stretched late into autumn evenings. Robert shared stories of his own youth, the strict upbringing that had taught him emotions were weaknesses, and how watching Elias come out had mirrored his deepest fears about failure as a parent. Jackson listened, his resentment softening as he saw the parallels in their journeys. Both men shaped by pressures that had nearly broken them. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Lily chase fireflies, Robert handed over a check for Elias's memorial fund at the design school. "He always wanted to help young artists find their voice," he said. Jackson accepted it this time, recognizing the gesture as genuine sacrifice rather than control. The act marked a shift, allowing Jackson to share more about the years after Elias's death, how single fatherhood had forced him to confront his grief head-on, attending support groups for gay parents where he found strength in shared stories of resilience. The emotional climax built when they visited Elias's grave together as a family for the first time. Lily placed her handmade card on the stone, whispering secrets about her new grandpa, while Jackson and Robert stood side by side in silence. Jackson felt the full weight of loss and gain, his internal conflict resolving into clarity. Forgiving Robert wasn't erasing the pain but choosing to build forward. Flashbacks flooded him. Their wedding in a small backyard ceremony with close friends, Elias vowing through every storm, "I'll choose you." That vow had sustained Jackson through the darkest days, teaching him that love for another man meant embracing all parts of himself, including the father he had become. Robert, too, reached a turning point, admitting publicly for the first time at a company board meeting that his son's life had taught him acceptance was the true measure of success. Misunderstandings lingered in small ways, like when Robert suggested moving them to a larger home, prompting Jackson to assert his independence. "This is the life Elias and I built," he said firmly. "We'll grow it together, not replace it." Robert backed down, learning humility in the process. Lily's presence anchored them, her questions about Daddy Elias prompting honest talks that healed old wounds. Jackson realized his growth had come full circle, from the young man terrified of rejection to the steady father guiding a new chapter. As Thanksgiving approached, Robert invited them to his mansion, a gesture heavy with symbolism. Jackson agreed, seeing it as the ultimate test of their progress. The dinner unfolded with laughter and stories, Lily at the center, bridging the gaps prejudice had once widened. In the quiet after the meal, Robert pulled Jackson aside. "I see him in you every day, in the way you love her." The words sealed a bond forged in sacrifice and awakening, proving that family could expand beyond blood when hearts chose understanding. Yet one final truth waited, a letter Elias had left for his father, its contents promising to tie their journeys together in unexpected ways. The letter from Elias arrived on a crisp December morning, tucked inside a box Robert had kept sealed since the funeral. Jackson watched as the older man read it aloud, his voice steady at first, then breaking with every line. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means Jackson finally trusted you with our world. I never stopped loving you. Lily is my gift to the future, yours now too. Forgive yourself like I forgave you long ago. Tears streamed down Robert's face as the words washed away the last barriers, confirming what Jackson had always known. Elias's heart had been big enough for everyone. They spent the afternoon together, Robert sharing the letter with Lily in simple terms. Her small hand in his as she processed the connection to a father she barely remembered but felt in every story. Jackson felt a profound peace settle over him, the culmination of years of internal struggle and external conflict resolving into acceptance. As winter lights twinkled across Los Angeles, the family gathered for a quiet holiday celebration in the Silver Lake bungalow. Robert helped decorate the tree Elias had picked out years ago, his billionaire hands clumsy with ornaments but full of purpose. Lily's giggles filled the room, a sound that healed more than any therapy could. Jackson reflected on the journey, from the shocking discovery at the grave to this moment of unity, seeing how every misunderstanding, every sacrifice, had led to growth. He had evolved from grieving partner to confident co-parent, Robert from rigid tycoon to devoted grandfather. Their paths intertwined by the love Elias had championed. The pivotal choices, to listen, to forgive, to include, had reshaped their lives, proving that identity crises and societal pressures could yield to human connection when met with courage. On Christmas Eve, as snow dusted the distant mountains visible from the window, Robert raised a glass. To Elias and the family we almost lost. Jackson clinked his, the gesture sealing their bond without words. Lily fell asleep between them on the couch, her presence the living legacy of two men who had loved fiercely against all odds. The emotional arc complete, Jackson stepped outside under the stars, whispering thanks to the man who had changed everything. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, proof that healing could emerge from the deepest pain. True or false? A parent's late acceptance can truly heal the scars left by years of rejecting their gay son's life and love?